Hi, this is Shady Atia, professor at Liège University in Belgium, and today's presentation is about novelty in research. This presentation is very useful if you have an article, if you are submitting a thesis or a dissertation, because it's very important to make sure that you are articulating and embedding these features of novelty of your research and how far making sure that your work is innovative. Now, the presentation is a part of a playlist on master thesis and PhD dissertation, but it is also catering for researchers who are looking for publishing a research work. I advise you to watch previous videos that are very relevant in relation to this context. Now, who is the audience of today's presentation? It is for researchers who are preparing a research thesis or a dissertation or a conference paper or a journal publication. And for sure, novelty means something that is unique in the field or scope you are analyzing. So it can be a new methodology or it can be a new theme that you are presenting or coming up and sets the stage for a new knowledge. So you need to make sure that these criteria are well met. Also, it happens often that authors get rejected when they are submitting papers, and one of the most common reasons for rejection is the lack of novelty. So editors, when they are reviewing a new manuscript, they will make sure that this novelty is well present thematically, methodologically, and also it is well articulated in the cover letter, in the introduction and the discussion. And once they cannot find a sufficient articulation and justification, they will reject the paper. Therefore, the objective of today's presentation is mainly to highlight the novelty in your research and help you to do that. And in this sense, we are trying to answer the following question: how to assure the novelty of my research, whether it's an article, a thesis, or a dissertation? Well, the structure of today's presentation, I'm going to give a brief introduction about novelty's definition and the obsession about novelty that we have been experiencing in the last 100 years. Positioning, how to position your work, justify and frame it. What are the types and tools that we can use as researchers to articulate novelty and think early ahead while we are developing our concept of our paper. And for sure, we will talk and delve over the value quad chart, which is a very important chart that is used to really judge the innovative feature of any research. Then I will talk with you about how to embed novelty in an article, in which part, sections of a document or an article. Give some example before some takeaway message. So let's start with our first part about novelty and what is novelty. Now, as you know, modernism is a very important movement that was associated with novelty. And modern societies are addicted to novelty. In fact, when we look at literature and we find out that the simplicity is subjective, and the simplest of novelty emotion is surprise. So the easy way to say what is novel: when you get surprised. So in a research community, when readers or when an editor would look at a work, and the first thing you can try to impress them is to make sure that your work is surprising them regarding your outcomes or your results. So we get excited about something new, or we react with arousal, adaptation, response when we find something new. And without this surprise effect, you can hardly consider your work novel and innovative. So it's very important that you make sure that your work is not business as usual. It's just not like a repetition of what has been done. You need to make sure at least that you can bring this emotion of surprise for the reader or for the editor to make sure that your work is really novel. Now, when we look at the definition, novelty of the research refers to one element or several elements that are new in the research. It can be a methodology, it can be an observation, which leads to a new knowledge discovery. And in this sense, a novelty should contribute to scientific progress and make sure that you are advancing science. And this is very critical and very difficult also to achieve. Science is built upon scholarship consensus, and that changes over time. And here it comes the subjective nature, because actually it's your community who will define what is novel. So the more you are connected to your society and your community, and the more you understand what are the problems that they are already concerned and they are publishing about, you will be able to surprise them. But as long you are far away from any scientific community, you are not a member of a regular conference or a journal publication group, or an association that is concerned with a specific research problem, it will be very difficult also to articulate this novelty because you do not belong to the community. And as I say here, that novelty changes over time. Maybe some things you did 20 years ago today is not relevant. at all. If you get an idea also from the past, maybe today it can be reintroduced and it will be seen as something new. So in any case, it's difficult to define exactly what is novel, so you need to be very connected to your community. Now, if you remember, I had a lecture on the foundation of scientific writings. You can have a look at it, but in this lecture I was saying that any scientific article is divided in two parts. One part is the science and one part is the communication. And as you can see, the part that is considered in black, which is the science part, this is the hard core of your work. However, the communication is the soft core of your work. And here we are trying to do three main things. We are trying to tell a story, to persuade. We are trying to organize the work in a structured way to make the work understandable and structured. And for sure, we are trying to make the communication as clear as possible in our communication. So in this sense, when we are talking about novelty, novelty will not be ever on the side of the hard core of your paper. It will be on the soft core of your paper, meaning that it will be your way of communication that will articulate this novelty, and it will the style of your writing that you will try to convince the community and the readers that this is a novel work. So it's a skill that you need to develop, and it requires a lot of effort. It requires also a lot to be knowledgeable about your literature in your field in the last 5-10 years. And from here it comes that it is considered as a communication skill to well refine it and articulate it in a text. It is never a hard science. Now, when we look about novel papers are more likely to disrupt existing literature. Novel papers are more likely to become sleeping beauties, meaning that they will accumulate citation impact over the long run. They will keep being cited and cited and cited because they're bringing something new. So also we can quantify novelty of an article, of a work, by seeing how long it has been having an impact or how long it has been cited on the long term. However, the deluge of new papers and the science of scientific fields is slowing the progress of new ideas in large fields of science, and unfortunately, with the abundance of publications and the large volumes, we are becoming more and more unable and blind to see what is novel and what is not novel. So this is also a very important aspect to look at. We are in the era of mass production of scientific work, so to distinguish yourself would be very difficult, and it will be very easy that an editor will not appreciate your work or not understand she or he your work, because simply they are seeing so much work and their ability to focus and concentrate and really understand what is the essence of your work is very hard. Also, what I need to say here is that many editors who will review a paper, they are very conservative, meaning that if you are 2 steps forward, they can give you a desk reject because your work is maybe groundbreaking or too innovative. They will not believe it. So in this sense, it's sometimes, unfortunately, better to go step by step and show the innovation in a very incremental, short-term progressive way, rather than showing a big idea that can change radically things, because you will get already a lack of recognition by your community. So it's important to understand that. Now let's move to the second part of the presentation, positioning. What is it about positioning? You need to position your work and make sure that your article is well positioned in the literature. Now, all of us will conduct a literature review. It will be part of your article, whether you integrate it in your introduction or in a section on the state of the art. But the ultimate aim of a review of literature is to provide background information about a phenomena or a problem using existing relevant and reliable or credible literature. So it's important to make sure that you already did your homework and reviewed the literature. There will be always questions in your mind which you try to resolve by reading. So you have a research question, you read, and then here comes the important part. In the end, you will still look for answers to your set of questions, but find nothing that addresses your curiosity. So if you have a question and the literature review is not answering this question, then you can make sure that you are on the right path and that your topic might be a novel topic, because it is not, you could not find an answer in existing literature. So have you read enough? This is a question we ask always to researchers when they are writing the first article. Do you know enough about the literature? There is a possibility that you might have not read everything, and that there may be some literature that you have missed somewhere, or somehow. Don't forget that many research engines, that if you are using classical research engine with classical keywords, you might end up falling on a cloud of publications, but you are totally missing out for the wrong use of a keyword, another cloud of publication that is very relevant to your topic. So first of all, you need to be critical and make sure first and ask yourself, did I read enough or not? Now, this very important tool that I use and I advise my researchers always to use when they are articulating novelty is to use this knowledge gap triangle, which is very famous. It is produced by Holger Robert Meyer. And as you can see, we are embedding or integrating this triangle content in the literature review section or in the introduction section. And as you can see, the first part of this triangle is asking you how to identify your problem domain. So you have to start your storytelling by identifying a problem domain and cite all relevant studies that discuss this problem domain. If the problem has no relevant publication and citation, most probably then you are in the wrong area, and most probably your topic is not important and it was not relevant to the society, unfortunately. Now, the second step to look at, or in your writing storytelling, is to have a critical discussion of what has been done before. And the step number 3 is to identify the knowledge gap so that you can articulate your objectives, and right after your objective you can describe the novelty of your work. So this is the logical way of writing an introduction or a state-of-the-art section, while you are going step by step by identifying the problem, having a critical discussion about what has been done before, and then you identify the knowledge gap and you say this problem was not solved, this issue is still uncovered, and from there you say, therefore my aim of my research is to achieve or cover or unsolve this problem or this riddle or this gap, and finally comes the novelty after that directly. So you describe your novelty section after you have described your objectives. Now, as part of our section on positioning, let me also show you what it is. Actually, positioning is that you start to compare your work with the work that was done by other researchers and pointing out the things that your study does which was never done before. So actually, you need to justify and frame your novel contribution in relation to previous work and in relation to other researchers. So in this sense, you can cite projects or you can cite researchers and their articles and mention what they done before you regarding the same type of problem, and make sure that when you are describing and citing them, that you check what was not done and what was done, and make sure that what you want to do and your inquiry is really not answered and not investigated in those previous studies. And by that you are positioning yourself in relation to others. Now let me give you another example on about positioning, and I would like to take this example of the pizza. As you know, there is a proliferation of types of pizza, but let's take this simple example. Early on in the 80s, the innovation that was introduced to a classical pizza, as you know, pizza became massively consumed in the 60s, and the 70s, 80s, and at that time one of the most famous pizzas was the Margherita, the classical. But in the 80s, some companies started to bring novelty and innovation, and for them novelty was what? Was to introduce the chicken pizza. At that time, making a pizza with chicken, was something new, so this was considered and labeled as novel. 10 years after, this was not anymore a novelty, so the company started to think, and pizza producers, what can be new? So they introduced the barbecue chicken, which is actually the same thing, but they are treating it methodologically in a different way, and they are introducing it and selling it as an innovative work. And this was something like around the 90s and the 80s, the 90s and the 2000s, that the barbecue chicken. Today in the 2020s, we are faced with something totally new, which is called the pulled chicken. And this is sold massively in many pizza chains, and as you can see, it's sold as an innovative product, something very new, and this is the thing that will pull the leg of clients. Now, if you look at it from a pure objective way, actually it's the same thing. It's always chicken, but every time there is a small twist, a small treatment that has been done to this product, and it was integrated in the final pizza, and then the pizza was marketed and promoted and branded as something new. So the same way like this is done in the industrial world or in the food industry, we can take this analogy and apply it to our context. But I'm not done with pizza. I still have another example. One of the things when we do positioning also with pizza, I can start to distinguish pizza from a geographical location. As you can see, this is a map of the United States of America, and you can see that some regions, they have a specific type of pizza. So I can even start to market it or distinguish my product geographically. So I say here it is more about processed meat pieces. Here it is vegetarian in the California Southwest with mushroom and spinach. Here in the north it is Hawaii, and in the west it is olives, and so on. So depending on the geographical region, I can introduce innovation and make sure that it is coupled with a regional or a contextual geographical context. And why I'm saying that is that because in some areas, if we are introducing a new idea, it depends on the context. If you are going to a place and this idea was never used before, or it is a totally not applicable concept that was not applied before, then it can be considered novel. And we see that a lot between the south and the north, and between the east and the west. In some situation you have a product, this product is already long and penetrating the market since years. It's a very classical product, it's not an innovation, but once you bring this product to a community that was never using it, it's considered then an innovation, and it's considered as a novelty. So you need to be very aware. If you are taking a medicine, for example, and this medicine has been tested for years and it's commonly prescribed in a country, but then you're taking it in another context that they have never having this medicine, and you are making a small modification to the local habits or checking what are the physical conditions of the humans or clients that will, patients that will use this medicine, then you can contextualize this medicine in this new community, and here comes this innovation. So taking an idea from a standardized countries and applying it in a non-standardized country can be considered as an innovative solution, and the other way around. If you are taking a medicine from the Chinese traditional medicine or from test trial based medicine from the east, and you are testing it in the west, it can be also considered as an innovation. So moving an idea and changing the context, geographical context, can be considered as an innovation. Now let's go to some practical advices. What are the types of innovation, and what are the tools that I can use as a researcher to make sure that while I'm conceptualizing my paper, that innovation is forwardly articulated and it will be well defined. First of all, there isn't any scale for measuring novelty. You know, there are four major measures that can be discussed in terms of novelty. The rarity, how rare is something. So this can be one of the criteria that we use. Is this topic rarely defined? Did many people publish about it or not? So if a theme or a new method or a topic or a solution or a concept is presented in science, we can start to say it's novel because it's rare. Very little people have addressed this topic. This can be a criteria. Another criteria, it can be related to the value, and I consider value is more important than rarity, because here it is related to your society and to the problems and the needs of your problem. So the more your research brings value, meaning that it is answering a very serious societal and current need. Third measure that we can evaluate novelty based is the complexity. So if you are proposing a solution, or you are proposing a concept or a framework or an approach that can answer certain complex problems, and it is integrated, multi-criteria based, then we can consider that this complexity of your proposal, of your research approach, is already the innovation. And for sure we can bring also a fourth measure, which is the unfamiliarity, meaning that you introduce a concept in a community or a journal or in a readership to your readership that they are not familiar with, even though it could be already known in another field or another domain, but you are here bringing it and making it more familiar in this community. So these are all four measures. But when I go do research, mainly I ask my researchers to follow one of those research approaches. So let's start with the first approach. On the left side, as you can see, I have here the new method versus an old method. So I try to ask my students to classify the literature and ask them who are using new methods, who are using old methods. So this is the first question, and they have to draw these two squares and cite the references that are using new methods and the references that are using old methods. And then I ask him who is using a new problem, working on new problems, and who is working on old problems. And then they start also to classify them. And then the intersection between the new method and the new problem, this can have the area with potential breakthroughs, and this is the area that you should start your research endeavors to make sure that you are building up and adding something new. So it's very important that you have a map in front of your desk when you are doing a literature review to define what are the old topics, what are the new topics related to this field of inquiry that you're interested in, or related to this specific phenomena or research problem. And then you need to ask yourself also, what are the new methods and what are the old methods that are used in this context? And based on filling those circles with citations and reference studies, you can define the leading studies and the leading investigations and build on them and start to read them more thoroughly to start to continue building on them. So this is the first approach. The second approach that you can use is that you just say, okay, I will investigate existing methods that are classically used, and then you come up with another existing method that is used but in a different way. So you can test two different methods and then you combine them and you come up with a new method that mixes two approaches. And this is also can bring you to innovative approach. And here we call this way the methodological innovation. So you combine, let's say, artificial intelligence with a classical modeling approach, or you combine automated calibration system with a classical data diagnostic system, for example. And from there you combine both and you work them out, and finally you develop a new approach. So those are two examples of novelty, and this tool is very useful. I advise you to use one of them and ask yourself always, what is novel of my research, and try to draw these schemes and integrate them in your PowerPoints when you are presenting your work. Now, to make you aware about novelty, there is two main branches or types of novelty. We call it thematic novelty, meaning that we have a novel research topic, and as you can see here, if we are talking about a new vaccine for a new pandemic, for example, this is a new theme, so we are trying to work on this theme. And you will see that in research there is always 10 trends. Every 3 years there are cyclical trends. This time maybe it's artificial intelligence, tomorrow it's machine learning, after that it will be robotics, and so on and so on. But you need to know that thematically every 3 years there are new cycles of trends that researchers follow. Every 3 years there is a main societal challenge that influences most of the fields, and researchers try to associate with them with these trends. But make sure that you are not only following cyclical short-term trends, make sure that you are following structural trends, because a structural trend will last for 20 years, while a cyclical trend will last only for 3 years. So when you are investing in a theme and you are making sure that you want to develop your research in this area around these concepts, around these ideas, make sure that this theme is not only a cyclical theme that will last only shortly for 3 years and then it will be forgotten. Just go for something that is more structural regarding its importance, so that you make sure that at least in 20 years there will be enough inertia, enough of publication in this area. The second type of research that we talk about, innovative research, is the methodological. So next to the thematic novelty, we can say also methodological novelty. And in this sense, we are not talking about the topic, we are talking about the way. And as you see, I always explain that there are only 4 research methodologies. 1 is qualitative and 3 are quantitative. And the quantitative are modeling, observations, and experimental. Now, if you have come with a novel way, combining one of those together, or making sure that you are bridging different methods with different techniques, that can be considered also a methodological novelty. So your research here is not about the topic itself, but it's about a new method that combines different approaches. And let me give you this example that I always use. The watch, the classical watch, is equal to a digital watch. There is no difference from a functional point of view. But this works with a microchip electronically, and this works with a chain, and it is mechanical. So just changing the methodology while having the same theme can be seen as an innovation. So this is also very important to think about. Ask yourself, if I'm working on the same topic but I am changing the methodology, why not working with this way to make sure that this is the novelty of my work? And in this sense, you are either working thematically, thematic novelty, or a methodological novelty. Now let's move to the fourth part of today's presentation, which is the added value quad chart, which is a very important quad chart. It is developed by Sovakul, Axen, Sorel. There are 3 authors, and this is a very interesting quad graph that we always use in the lab to make sure that our work is really advancing science. And as you can see, he divided research into 4 quadrants. The first quadrant low here is not socially useful. On the left, it is not advancing science. Up, it is socially useful. And on the right, it is advancing science. So we all want to stay in the socially useful research and innovations, and we want to make sure that we are advancing research. And if we look in reality, what is most of the research published? Where is it, in which area? Unfortunately, it is covering those through other quadrants. It is either socially useful but not advancing science, and this is all the types of applied research that many researchers do just to waste their time, get funding, and keep themselves busy without any advancement of science. They're just going to do it for the prestige, to get promoted, to get money in, money out, get PhDs, and so on. And as you can see, it has a commercial interest, and it does not advance science, and it's just we are doing what we know, and we are just applying some methods to the practice. Without advancing science. We are just doing some advancement on a societal level. We are solving societal problem, but we are not advancing science. Then you have the second quadrant. Also, unfortunately, many people work on this area, which is theories with potential use. They can be socially useful, but they are not socially useful at all. And they are also not advancing science. So here we are talking about theories with potential use, abstract concept, people who never wants to implement or apply. They're just coming with frameworks and concepts and approaches. And when you ask them, how can you make it concrete? They just keep saying it's an abstract thing, it's a way of thinking, it's a decision framework. And once you tell them how this can be useful societally, they say this should be done by somebody else. And finally, they don't advance any science. And then the worst group of researchers that publish also, that are doing research that is biased, it is poorly designed, and it is not validated. And in this sense, they are neither advancing science nor making it useful from a societal point of view. So make sure that you avoid those 3 quadrants when you are doing research, because definitely if you want to make a novel research, it has to fall in this quadrant. You need to make sure that you are advancing science, you are having a socially useful topic, and you are really working on topic that is innovative, bringing something new, and that you are contributing to science. And in this sense, we use this word niche, which is a French word, and a niche is simply a specialized corner of your scientific field where you have potential to conduct research and create important new knowledge for a significant period of time. So search the niche, make sure you have one niche, not many niches, and focus on it, and always ask yourself, am I advancing research, or am I just applying and doing research for doing research? Here it's very important to look at it, define your niche, and once you are able to understand what has been done before and what is very unique and what was not done and how you are trying to push the boundaries of science in this area, then you are well prepared to make sure that your work is innovative. Another important thing I want to share with you when it comes to novelty, well, novelty can be ranked and classified. If you have a significant contribution and you have an individual scientific work that you did alone and you have something new, you can publish it in a Q4 journal. This is considered as a significant work. If you have a remarkable results of your research and still you are working individually alone, then most probably this can be a Q3 publication, much better than the Q4. If you are having a striking result, a finding that is striking, that is really solving a solution, that is bringing insights, we are understanding something new, then most probably you have done it in a team, and then this can assure you to publish in a Q2 journal. And for sure, if you have a groundbreaking results or finding that was done in collaboration with a team of researchers from all over the world working, tackling on the problem, and you have groundbreaking results, then we can say this is one of the highest level of novelty, and this deserves to be published in a Q1 article. So don't forget that also editors, they are looking at this classification. You might disagree with it. I'm not saying it is casted in concrete. It's a reflection, but as you can see, depending on your the quality of your journal and how far it has an impact regarding citation, regarding readership, also the level and the novelty of your work will vary. The higher your work is novel, representing a collaboration and a teamwork done on an international level, tackling a real big problem, you are talking here about groundbreaking team-based novelty that can be published in a Q1. And the lower you are going down, you are working alone, you are doing small-scale things, maybe you have some innovative approaches, but they are very small, they are very incremental, then you are working on Q4 or Q3 publications. Now let me take you to the part of practical side. How can I embed novelty in my article? Now I have my article, I got rejected, or I'm starting to design my research concept from the beginning. I want to be so critical, and I want to make sure that my work is novel. So what should I do? Well, the overall research context and the problem needs to be well defined, and you need to understand very good what is the gap and what is the knowledge gap of your field or of your research article, and what will be the solution that you're trying to present and offer in your work. So after that, you can introduce the novel outcome, which is the step forward, and finally you need to discuss the implication or the potential application of your novel idea. So use these criteria at the beginning to make sure that your work is well positioned and well articulated as novel. And you have to ask yourself how the main novel findings fit the journal. Never underestimate that a journal is not like another. Every journal has a different editor, has a different readership, has a different community, has a different history. They believe in certain methods, they believe in certain convictions, they have certain experiences. So it's not easy to move from a journal to another. So make sure if you are submitting in a journal to know how is your novel idea fitting in this journal. Some journals are only methodological journals. So if you are coming with a thematic innovation, they will not appreciate it. And some journals are only talking about thematic innovative topics. They're only talking about new concepts, new ideas, new solutions. They don't care about the methodology. So once you come up with a methodological innovation, they will not appreciate it. So ask yourself, what about the journal's focus? What about what is the journal focus area? Ask yourself, how much common background information and explanation did you provide in your article? Did you explain enough the background and the knowledge gap? How do you explain why the findings will interest that journal readers? Did you mention that? Did you articulate in a very explicit way why this article will be useful for readers? Did you cite recent research and contribute to contribute to a current debate in this journal? Are you linked to the current debates of the journal? Do you know actually what is this journal community meeting? Do they have a conference? Did you attend ever one of their conferences? Do you know what are the problems they're concerned with? Do you know what are the editors think, how they think? What are the topics they publish about? And what are their concerns? What are the limitations of this community? What are the challenges of this community? Are you coupling your research topic to this debate and the current debate of this journal? These are all questions that need to be positively answered. Also, you need to maximize your chances of success by doing the following. You have one of the first things the editor will read when is reading your work is to make sure that you grab his or her attention. You need also to communicate with them directly and give them what they need to know in the cover letter, in the highlights, in the introduction, in the discussion. All that needs to be articulated. You need to show them why is the topic important, and you need to make sure that they understand what is novel about this research. You need to show them what is novel in this research straight away without making them get lost in a long text and making lost in a long storytelling. So, making practical advices here, embed novelty in the highlights and the abstract. You need in the novelty to have some punchlines, at least one line or two on novelty. In your key message, you need to make it very clear what is the key message of your research. If the editors cannot work out your take-home message, they will reject the paper. If you don't come up with a very clear message in your manuscript that is repeated all the time in the highlights, in the abstract, in the introduction, and in the discussion section, what I found here and why what I found is groundbreaking or novel or striking or significant. This needs to be always articulated. Also, editors will reject if you fail to convince them of your study's importance. If you're talking about a very trivial topic that you're trying to make a very complex system to solve another complex problem that is already not relevant, nobody cares about, then also it will get rejected. Make sure that the abstract must include 1 or 2 lines of novelty. So you must mention in the abstract, this paper presents a novel something, a topic, idea, solution, whatever. Mention it at least in 2 sentences. And for sure, editors, they will always say like this: if I am not interested, then the readers will too be not interested, and therefore, if they don't find it interesting, they will reject your paper and you'll get a desk reject before even getting the chance to be reviewed by reviewers. So this is very important to avoid. Now, in the introduction section, like you are going to introduce novelty in the highlights and in the abstract, you need to do it in the introduction. So you must have a paragraph on novelty, and as I showed you, this triangle that we are using, we are always using this storytelling triangle, plus then at the end, after the objective, we have a paragraph on novelty. You have to ask you make sure that what is the problem that is being solved. This needs to be included. Why is the topic important? What is the key novel outcome or the breakthrough that you are presenting? And why is it a priority for this particular journal? This is a very tricky and very difficult one to achieve. So this means that you need to know enough the journal, and you need to be very close to this journal community to make sure that when you are formulating and articulating your cover letter, your introduction, and having your novelty, it's not only I was saying this is novel, this is new, this is groundbreaking. No, and why for this community? This novel topic brings value, brings added value. This is very important to look at. Now, when you have your discussion section, this is also another area. So let me remind you, you will talk about novelty in the highlights, in the abstract, in the introduction, and in the discussion. And you need to have a paragraph on novelty. You have to discuss the strengths of your research and your new research. What is strong about your work? You need to talk also about the limitation and the shortcoming. And for sure, you need to discuss the limitations and the implications of the finding. Now I'm almost moving to the end. This is an example before finishing, just to show you how we did it. This was a paper we published with one of my previous PhD student, Dr. Mohammed Amer, for example. And the topic title, if you want to Google this article, you can download it for free. Methodology for Design Decision Support of Cost Optimal Zero Energy Lightweight Construction. Very classical paper, but published in a Q1 article because we had a very novel research method that we applied. And in fact, we started by having in the introduction a long background information, talking what was done before, who did. We here in this background, we are talking about the problem. Exactly, or following the triangle, this famous knowledge gap triangle that I showed you before. So we are having in this first section of the introduction background, we are talking about the problem, but not from our point of view. We are writing it from the point of view of literature. Who are the people who discussed this problem and what did they try to do? We are talking about institutions, we are talking about research labs, we are talking about governments, professional reports, because we have a specific research problem and we want to make sure that there is a community that is already interesting and that this problem is societal and it's already documented and there's enough documents that are describing this problem. So this is the first part of the background. Then we move to the second part of the introduction. We are talking about previous work. Here we are talking about previous studies that try to solve this problem. And as you can see, this is something around 1,500 or even more words where we are citing the most important and relevant studies that tried to find a solution to this problem. And finally, we move to the third part of our introduction, which is the aim and contribution of this study. So here we are talking directly to the editor and to the reviewer and to the reader, telling them after we described what is the problem and who tried to tackle it before us, we have now a very clear aim and objective, and our work is novel because, and we start to build on that. So as you can see here in the beginning, we are saying that as shown in the previous studies, to achieve a multi-objective design solution, complex methods and tools for analysis and optimization has been introduced, which is far beyond the capacity of decision makers. The methods employed are sophisticated and use intertwined computational approaches. Using such method is not practical, is not feasible, especially for small and middle-sized companies, for example. It has been proven that this is not the most efficient algorithm that can solve this problem. So what are we doing here in our first part of our aim? We are attacking previous work and articulating that this work, despite its value, it did not solve the problem that we came up and articulated. And therefore we start to say, and therefore our aim in green to introduce a simplified methodology which provides concrete approaches. So now after saying what is the problem, we articulate our objective. And finally, in orange, we are highlighting the novelty of our work. We say that our work is original. We are using a simplified method in terms of complexity. We are integrating certain criteria in its process that were never integrated before. We are defining a reference building concerning a specific problematic. We are reducing the required labor-intensive and time-consuming simulation methodology. We are also avoiding using sophisticated mathematical approaches, and we are decreasing uncertainty, and our methodology consists of a multi-stage decision-making approach with a framework and a parametric analysis, and for sure our methodology is validated and can shorten the time of implementation. This is all part of the reflection of the introduction. And once we move to the same example to the discussion section, in the strengths of limitation, we are coming back to re-articulate and evaluate post-research our work. We are mentioning what is new about our work, how it provides informed decision making. We are quantifying all the benefits. Even we are saying that our methodology reduced the time and effort needed to optimize multi-objective design targets by 60%. So even the added value and the novelty is quantified. We are providing numbers. According to the case studies in this research, a total of 689 simulation runs were required compared to the optimization algorithm, which requires at least 1,800 simulation. We are benchmarking, we are positioning, we are comparing. We say most of the other studies, they used 1,800 simulations. We only did 689 and we achieved the same accuracy. Also, we say we conducted a comparative analysis and we used different algorithms in our solution. So you see the level of complexity. We are quantifying, we are marking, we are comparing our work with previous and showing that our methodology is better. Without this effort, nobody will believe and trust your work, and you will not be showing and standing out as a researcher, and the paper can be rejected. So it's very important to address this part in the discussion, in the introduction, in the highlights, and in the abstract of your work. Well, I'm done today. Just some takeaway messages before leaving you. Well, there are 4 measures of novelty. Novelty is a subjective parameter and it is hard to quantify, but the 4 measures are mainly rarity, value, complexity, and unfamiliarity. I always appreciate and prefer the value based innovation or novelty. Don't hesitate to get deeper in those fields. Some advices: write a high quality paper or write high quality papers about sound research that is useful, and write about topics that are currently of serious problem. Make sure that they are of serious concern. The society are talking about them. The governments are talking about it. The whole world are talking about this problem. Don't get stuck in delusional problems or trivial problems. So first advice, write high quality papers about sound research. This is my first advice. Second advice, seek research topics that advance science and improve our fundamental understanding in relation to your field. Check in your field what we don't know, what we don't understand, why certain phenomena happen, why certain practices happen, and start to tackle them, develop your observation, do your experiment to make sure that you can better provide some new and novel understanding, insights, or solutions. You must also, advice number 3, you must show that your research pushes boundary. You must show that you are justify clearly in your work that you are outlining why the research is needed. You must show that your work was something new. Previous people did this, and you have the right to cite them. And when you cite them, they say they only did this. They only worked on this topic, but I am going one step mile. I'm going the extra mile. You need to articulate that, because without this clear justification, what is new in your research, it will be very difficult for the editor and for the reviewer to understand what this work brings new. In the introduction, you must make sure to define the problem, identify a knowledge gap, and position your article, and make sure that it is well positioned in the R&D context, not only in the research but also in the development. In many fields, we've discovered that industry is more advanced than research. So don't hesitate if you are working on a technology or a technique and you are conducting your literature review. Don't only look at literature review, the classical scientific literature, articles and published documents. You have also to look at what is published by the industry. Maybe they have interesting reports, maybe they have reviews. Go take them and embed them in your literature review. And you can even use it as a very strong feature in your introduction by saying, in the industry we found this and this and this, and in the science we found this and this and this. And even though we found these solutions or these techniques or approaches or method in industry, in the research and in development, we still confirm that there is a problem, and therefore we are coming up with our solution or with our method, and so on and so on. Also justify the novelty in your abstract, justify it in your highlights, and justify it in the discussion. This is very important, and don't forget about it. And finally, the last advice, you need to collaborate with other researchers and co-authors. Co-author with papers with them and ask them for a second opinion. I really strongly advise all early career researchers who are unable to define what is novel or not, at least before starting, during the conceptual phase, you can involve co-authors and ask them for a workshop, make an online session, and start to discuss from the beginning and try to ask them to be very critical, to ask them to make the big question: is this novel enough? Is my work going to be interesting? Is it going to be standing the critical review of the editor and the reviewers? And the more you collaborate with co-authors who are older than you, they have more experience, they know better the community that you are collaborating in. First of all, you are networking. Secondly, you are learning. Thirdly, you are understanding and making the chances of getting published higher. So don't hesitate to invest in your network of co-authors, preferably international co-authors, preferably co-authors who are already published in the same journal where you are, so that you make sure that you have people from the same community on your board, on your side, and that you will learn from them what terms to use, what concept, what is novel. Is this really the debate, the community debate? Are you really touching it and basing your work on it? Well, that's the end of today's presentation. I invite you to check previous videos related to this playlist on master thesis and PhD dissertation. I hope the presentation was useful. Today's presentation was about novelty in research. I wish you the best of luck, and I wish you to articulate novelty very good in your work. Best of luck, and see you next time. Thank you.